The shackles burned against Kira's wrists, silver searing into her skin as the transport wagon lurched over frozen ground. She didn't scream. Screaming was what they expected, what they wanted. So she bit down on her tongue until she tasted copper and kept her eyes fixed on the iron bars separating her from the two guards who refused to meet her gaze. This was supposed to be the end of her story. The borders. The place where disgraced wolves went to die. But Kira had learned something in the 3 days since the Alpha Council stripped her of her rank, her name, and her future. The moment you have nothing left to lose is the moment you become truly dangerous. Before we continue, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that button because Kira's journey is going to shake you to your core, and you won't want to miss a single twist. The wagon stopped. Kira's heart slammed against her ribs, but she forced her breathing to remain steady. Through the bars, she could see it, the border wall. Massive. Ancient. Built from stone and reinforced with enough silver to kill any wolf who tried to cross back into pack territory. Beyond it, the land stretched into endless white, a frozen wasteland where the wind howled like tortured souls. Out, the lead guard barked. He was young, maybe 25, with fear dancing in his eyes. Fear of her. Even now. Kira rose slowly, her muscles screaming from 3 days of confinement. The shackles made it difficult, but she managed to step down from the wagon without stumbling. The cold hit her immediately, a vicious, biting wind that cut through the thin prisoner's tunic they'd given her. No coat. No boots thick enough for this climate. They weren't sending her here to survive. They were sending her here to be forgotten. Kira Hartley, the guard read from a scroll, his voice shaking slightly. You have been found guilty of treason against the Moon Valley Pack and the Alpha Council. You conspired to undermine Alpha King Gabriel Thornfield's authority and attempted to incite rebellion among the lower ranks. I did no such thing, Kira said quietly. Not a protest. Just a statement of fact. The guard flinched. Your sentence is exile to the borderlands. You are stripped of your rank, your family name, and all rights afforded to pack members. Effective immediately, you are declared dead to Moon Valley. May the Moon Goddess have mercy on your soul. Mercy. Kira almost laughed. The Moon Goddess had been silent for weeks, ever since Kira stumbled upon the truth that got her sent here. The truth about the Alpha Council's lies. About the bloodlines they'd erased. About the packs they'd slaughtered and buried in history books that no one was allowed to read. She'd found evidence. Documents. Proof that the borders weren't abandoned at all, that wolves lived there, thrived there, beyond the Council's control. And when she'd tried to bring it to light, they'd framed her. Planted false evidence. Turned her own packmates against her. 3 witnesses claimed she'd tried to poison the Alpha King. All 3 were council members' sons. The guard unlocked her shackles, and the silver clattered to the frozen ground. Kira's wrists were raw and bleeding, but the relief of being free from the metal was immediate. Her wolf stirred beneath her skin, weak but present, desperate to shift and run. Go, the guard said, stepping back quickly. Cross the threshold. You have 60 seconds before we close the gate permanently. Kira looked at the border wall, at the massive iron gate that stood open like a mouth ready to swallow her whole. Beyond it, snow swirled in violent eddies. Beyond it, she would be truly alone. Or would she? She thought of the documents she'd found. The maps showing settlements. Trade routes. Names of packs that weren't supposed to exist anymore. The borders are not lawless. They are free. Those words had been scrawled in the margin of one of the old texts, written in handwriting that looked ancient. At the time, she hadn't understood what they meant. But now, standing on the threshold of everything her pack feared, she thought she might. Kira took her first step forward. Then another. The wind screamed around her, but she didn't stop. She walked through the gate with her head high, her shoulders back, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her afraid. Behind her, the iron gate began to close with a groan that sounded like the earth itself was weeping. And then she heard it, a sound that made her blood run cold and her wolf surge to attention. Howling. Not one wolf. Not two. Dozens. Coming from deep within the borderlands, echoing across the frozen wasteland like a song. Like a greeting. Like a warning. The gate slammed shut behind her with a finality that shook the ground. Kira stood alone in the snow, her breath forming clouds in the air, her body already starting to shake from the cold. And somewhere in the distance, golden eyes appeared in the whiteness. She wasn't alone after all. The question was, would these wolves kill her before the cold did? Or was something else entirely waiting for her in the place where disgraced wolves went to die? The golden eyes didn't move closer. They simply watched. Kira's wolf clawed beneath her skin, begging to be released, but she couldn't shift, not yet. Not when she was this weak from 3 days without food, without rest, without the ability to properly heal from the silver burns. A shift now would leave her vulnerable, defenseless. So she stood her ground and stared back at the eyes in the darkness. 1 breath. 2. 3. Then the eyes blinked and vanished into the swirling snow. Kira released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Her entire body trembled, from cold, from exhaustion, from the adrenaline that was quickly fading now that the immediate threat had passed. She needed shelter. Soon. Or the borderlands wouldn't need wolves to kill her. The cold would do it for them. She turned in a slow circle, searching for anything that might offer protection from the wind. The landscape was brutal in its emptiness, just snow and ice and the occasional twisted tree that looked more dead than alive. But there, maybe a quarter mile to the east, she could see what looked like a rock formation. It wasn't much, but it might provide enough shelter to survive the night. 1 night at a time, she told herself. That's all you need to do. Survive 1 night at a time. She started walking, each step sinking into snow that reached her knees. The thin prison tunic was already soaked through, clinging to her skin like ice. Her feet had gone numb within minutes. But Kira had learned something important over the past 3 days of hell: pain was just information. Her body was telling her she was cold, that she was hurt, that she was in danger. She already knew all of that. What mattered was what she chose to do with the information. So she kept walking. By the time she reached the rock formation, the sun was beginning to set, not that there had been much sun to begin with. The sky had been a perpetual gray since she'd crossed the border. The rocks created a small alcove, barely large enough for her to curl up inside, but it blocked the worst of the wind. She wedged herself into the space, pulling her knees to her chest and wrapping her arms around them. This was it. This was what the Alpha Council had sentenced her to. A slow death in a frozen wasteland, alone and forgotten. Except she wasn't forgotten. Not entirely. Kira closed her eyes and let herself remember, not the trial, not the accusations, but before. When she'd been somebody. When she'd had a purpose. She'd been a scholar. One of the few wolves in Moon Valley who studied the old texts, the histories, the languages that most packs had abandoned. Her mentor, Elder Alfred, had been the one to show her the restricted archives. He'd been the one to whisper that not everything in their pack's history was as glorious as the Alpha Council claimed. Knowledge is power, Kira, he'd told her once, his weathered hands trembling as he unlocked a chest that hadn't been opened in decades. But it's also dangerous. The moment you know the truth, you become a threat to those who benefit from the lies. She'd laughed at the time. Laughed because she'd been naive enough to believe that truth mattered more than politics, that honor mattered more than power. Elder Alfred had died 2 weeks after she'd found the documents about the borderlands. Heart failure, they'd said. Natural causes. Kira had known better. And when she'd tried to continue his work, tried to bring the truth to light, they'd destroyed her instead. A sound cut through her thoughts, a footstep crunching in snow. Kira's eyes snapped open. Her wolf surged forward, flooding her exhausted body with enough strength to spring to her feet. She pressed her back against the rock and scanned the growing darkness. A figure emerged from the shadows. Female. Tall. Moving with the kind of lethal grace that spoke of years surviving in conditions that would break lesser wolves. She wore thick furs that looked hand-sewn, and her dark hair was braided away from a face that was all sharp angles and fierce eyes. Eyes that were currently studying Kira with an expression somewhere between curiosity and calculation. "You're the exile," the woman said. Not a question. Her voice was rough, like she didn't use it often. "Saw them dump you at the gate." Kira said nothing. Every instinct told her to be careful, to not reveal weakness, to not trust anyone in this place where trust could get you killed. The woman tilted her head. "You planning to freeze to death in that alcove? Because I'll be honest, it's a shit way to go. Takes hours. You'll lose your fingers and toes first. Then your nose. Then. What do you want?" Kira interrupted, her voice hoarse. A slow smile spread across the woman's face. Direct. I like that. Most newcomers spend the first few hours crying or begging the moon goddess for salvation. She stepped closer, and Kira tensed. Name's Rose. I run supplies between the settlements. Saw you come through and figured I'd make you an offer before the scavengers find you. Settlements? Kira's heart skipped. There are settlements here? 7 of them within a 3-day walk. For more if you're willing to go further north. Rose's eyes gleamed with something that might have been amusement. What, you thought the borders were empty? That's what they tell you in the Packlands, isn't it? That this place is just death and monsters and wolves who've lost their humanity? Yes, Kira admitted. Well, they lied. Rose crouched down so they were at eye level. The borders aren't lawless. They're free. No Alpha Council. No arbitrary ranks. No bloodline politics. Out here, you earn your place through skill, through contribution, through loyalty that you choose to give, not loyalty that's forced through pack bonds. It was everything Kira had read in those forbidden documents. Everything Elder Alfred had hinted at before they'd killed him. Why are you helping me? Kira asked. Rose stood, brushing snow from her furs. Because I was you once. 5 years ago. They sent me here for asking too many questions about where the council's taxes really went. She held out a gloved hand. You can come with me to the nearest settlement, Greystone. Get warm, get fed, hear the rules. Or you can stay here and die. Your choice. Kira looked at the offered hand. Looked at this woman who had survived what Kira was only beginning to endure. Then she thought about Alpha King Gabriel Thornfield, sitting in his throne room, confident that he'd erased the problem that was Kira Hartley. She thought about the council members who'd framed her. She thought about Elder Alfred's last words, knowledge is power. Kira reached out and gripped Rose's hand. Greystone, she said. Take me to Greystone. Rose's smile widened. Good choice, exile. Now let's move before nightfall. The real predators come out after dark. Greystone wasn't what Kira expected. She'd imagined makeshift shelters, desperate wolves huddled around dying fires, the kind of squalor that the Packlands always depicted when they spoke of the borders. Instead, what she found was a functioning settlement, 20 solid structures built from stone and timber, smoke rising from chimneys, and wolves moving with purpose through snow-packed streets. Close your mouth, Rose said with a smirk. You'll catch flies. Or frostbite. Kira barely heard her. She was too busy staring at a group of children playing in the snow, their laughter ringing out clear and bright. Children. Here. Thriving. How many live here? She asked. Greystone? About 80 year-round. More during trading season. Rose guided her toward the largest building at the settlement center. We've got a blacksmith, a healer, hunters, builders. Everything we need to survive without the council's so-called protection. The building Rose led her to was warm, blessedly, wonderfully warm. Heat radiated from a massive stone fireplace that dominated one wall. A dozen wolves sat at rough-hewn tables, eating what smelled like venison stew. Several looked up as Kira entered, their expressions ranging from curious to suspicious. New exile, Rose announced. Found her freezing to death in the eastern rocks. Figured we'd follow protocol. An older man stood from the table nearest the fire. He was broad-shouldered despite his age, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that had seen too much. Protocol means she gets one night, one meal, and the truth. After that, she decides if she stays or goes. Understood, Eddie, Rose said. Eddie gestured to an empty chair. Sit. Eat. Then we talk. Kira didn't need to be told twice. She sank into the chair, and moments later, a bowl of stew appeared in front of her. The first bite nearly made her weep, not because it was particularly delicious, but because it was warm and real and she hadn't eaten in 3 days. She forced herself to eat slowly, even though every instinct screamed to devour the entire bowl in seconds. Around her, the other wolves had returned to their conversations, but she could feel their eyes on her. Assessing. Judging. Wondering if she'd be an asset or a liability. When she'd finished, Eddie sat across from her. Up close, she could see the scars that marked his face and arms, the kind of scars that came from battles survived, not lost. Name? He asked. Kira Hartley. She paused. Former Moon Valley Pack. Something flickered in Eddie's eyes. Hartley. Any relation to Elder Alfred Hartley? Her heart stopped. He was my mentor. How do you? Alfred and I were friends before the council decided I was too dangerous to keep around. Eddie leaned back in his chair. He wrote to me sometimes. Sent letters through traders. His last letter mentioned a promising student who was getting too close to uncomfortable truths. His gaze sharpened. That you? Yes. The word came out as barely a whisper. Then his death wasn't natural. No. Kira's hands clenched into fists. They killed him. And when I tried to continue his work, they framed me for treason. Eddie nodded slowly, as if confirming something he'd already suspected. Welcome to the borders, Kira Hartley. Where the council sends everyone who threatens their carefully constructed lies. He stood. You'll sleep in the common house tonight. Tomorrow, we'll discuss whether you have skills worth keeping. But before he could walk away, the door burst open. A young wolf stumbled inside, his face flushed with exertion and something else, fear. Eddie. Scouts just sent word. There's a convoy approaching from the south. Official council transport. The entire room went silent. Council transport? Eddie's voice dropped to a dangerous growl. They never come this deep into the borders. Are you certain? 3 wagons. Heavy guard. And, the young wolf swallowed hard. They're flying the Alpha King's banner. Kira's blood turned to ice. No. It was impossible. The Alpha King never left Moon Valley. He sent subordinates to handle border business, sent soldiers to enforce his will. He didn't come himself. Unless something had changed. Unless he had a reason. Rose appeared at Kira's side, her hand dropping to the knife at her belt. How long until they arrive? An hour. Maybe less. Eddie's eyes found Kiera's. You've been here less than 4 hours, and already the Alpha King follows. Want to tell me what you're really running from? I don't know, Kiera said honestly, her mind racing. I'm supposed to be dead to the pack. Officially erased. There's no reason for him to. But even as she said it, pieces began clicking into place. The documents she'd found. The evidence of thriving border settlements. The proof that the council's narrative about the borders was a lie. What if someone had discovered what she knew? What if they realized that sending her here wasn't enough, that she needed to be truly eliminated before she could spread the truth? Or worse, what if the Alpha King was coming for an entirely different reason? Eddie turned to the room. Emergency protocol. Hide the children. Secure the food stores. Anyone who can fight, arm yourselves. His gaze swept back to Kiera. And you're going to tell me everything you know. Now. There's no time, Rose argued. We need to prepare defenses. We need information more, Eddie cut her off. If the Alpha King himself is coming to the borders, it's not a coincidence. He grabbed Kiera's arm, not roughly, but with urgency. Talk. Fast. What did you discover that scared them enough to send you here? Kiera took a shaky breath. I found records. Proof that the council has been lying about the borders for generations. Proof that they've been systematically erasing pacts, bloodlines, histories, anything that threatens their power structure. And I found something else. What? Maps. Trade routes. Evidence that the borders have been organizing. Becoming something the council can't control. She met Eddie's eyes. I think they're afraid. I think they've always been afraid of what would happen if border settlements unified. Eddie released her arm, his expression grim. They should be. A horn sounded in the distance, 3 sharp blasts that echoed across the frozen landscape. The Alpha King had arrived. And standing in that warm hall, surrounded by wolves who'd learned to survive without pack bonds or council law, Kiera made a decision that would change everything. She wouldn't hide. She wouldn't run. She would face Gabriel Thornfield and show him exactly what his punishment had created. The Alpha King stood at the edge of Greystone like a dark omen. Gabriel Thornfield was exactly as Kiera remembered, tall, broad-shouldered, with black hair that fell just past his collar and eyes the color of smoke and steel. He wore the formal regalia of his position, a thick cloak lined with silver thread, leather armor etched with the Moon Valley crest, and an expression of absolute authority that most wolves found impossible to resist. Most wolves. Kiera felt her wolf stir with recognition, but not submission. Never submission. Not anymore. Eddie stood at the settlement's entrance with a dozen armed wolves flanking him. Kiera had positioned herself slightly behind and to his left, visible, but not provocative. Rose remained at her side, one hand resting casually on her blade. Eddie Stone, Gabriel's voice carried across the snow, smooth and commanding. It's been a long time. Not long enough, Thornfield. Eddie's tone was respectful but not deferential. What brings the Alpha King to the borders? We've paid our tribute. Haven't caused trouble for the council. I'm not here about tribute. Gabriel's eyes scanned the assembled wolves, and Kiera saw the moment they landed on her. Something flickered in his expression, surprise, perhaps, or recognition. I'm here about a fugitive. We don't harbor fugitives, Eddie said calmly. Everyone here has been officially exiled by the council. You can't be a fugitive when you've already been sentenced. Clever. Gabriel stepped forward, his guards moving with him. But we both know there's a difference between accepting your sentence and thriving despite it. His gaze remained locked on Kiera. Kiera Hartley. You're supposed to be dead. I am dead, Kiera said, stepping forward before Eddie could stop her. You declared it yourself. Dead to Moon Valley. Dead to the pack. So why are you here? Something dangerous flashed in Gabriel's eyes. Because dead women don't send letters to neighboring packs questioning the council's authority. Dead women don't start asking questions about trade agreements and border sovereignty. Kira's heart skipped. She hadn't sent any letters. She'd barely been here 4 hours. But someone had. I don't know what you're talking about, she said carefully. Don't lie to me. Gabriel closed the distance between them in 3 long strides, stopping just feet away. This close, she could feel the power radiating from him, alpha dominance that would have brought most wolves to their knees. 2 days ago, the Alpha of Silverpine received a letter signed with your name. It contained detailed information about council corruption, about erased bloodlines, about, he stopped, jaw clenching. About things you should have never learned. Then maybe you should have killed me instead of exiling me, Kira shot back, her wolf rising to meet his challenge. But you didn't. You sent me here to disappear, to be forgotten. That was your choice. A choice I'm reconsidering. The threat hung in the air like ice. Eddie moved to intervene, but Rose spoke first. You can't kill exiles in border settlements. It violates the Accord of 1847. Or has the council decided to abandon the last treaty that keeps the borders from open rebellion? Gabriel's attention shifted to Rose, and Kira saw him reassess the situation. He'd come here expecting to find a broken woman, a disgraced exile barely surviving. Instead, he'd found an organized settlement with wolves who knew their rights, who weren't afraid of him. Who were protecting her. I'm not here to kill anyone, Gabriel said finally, though his tone suggested otherwise. I'm here to offer Kira a choice. What choice? Kira demanded. Return to Moon Valley. Publicly recant the accusations against the council. Admit you fabricated evidence out of spite for being passed over for promotion. His eyes bored into hers. Do that, and I'll restore your rank. Give you a position in the archives under direct council supervision. You'll have your life back. It was a trap. A pretty, poisonous trap designed to discredit everything she'd discovered. And if I refuse? Then I'll hunt down every wolf who received those letters. Every pack that started questioning council authority because of information you leaked. I'll make examples of them. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. How many wolves are you willing to sacrifice for your truth, Kira? She wanted to hit him. Wanted to let her wolf loose and show him exactly what she thought of his threats and his power plays and his corrupt counsel. But Eddie's hand landed gently on her shoulder, a reminder to think, not react. You're bluffing, she said instead. If you could prove I sent those letters, you'd already be moving against those packs. But you can't prove it. Because I didn't send them. Gabriel's expression darkened. Then who did? Maybe someone else who found the same evidence I did. Maybe Elder Alfred left more than one student behind. Maybe, she smiled coldly. Maybe your counsel isn't as secure as you think it is. For a long moment, Gabriel just stared at her. And in that moment, Kira saw something she hadn't expected, uncertainty. The Alpha King, the most powerful wolf in the region, was uncertain. He'd come here expecting compliance. Expected fear. He'd found neither. 3 days, he said finally, addressing Eddie now. I'm giving Greystone 3 days to decide if harboring a traitor is worth the consequences. After that, I'll return with enough soldiers to level this settlement if necessary. You'd start a war over one exile? Eddie asked quietly. I'd start a war to protect the stability of every pack under council jurisdiction, Gabriel countered. The borders exist because we allow them to exist. Don't forget that. He turned to leave, his guards forming up around him. But before he'd taken 3 steps, Kira's voice rang out, You're afraid. Gabriel stopped. You're afraid of what I represent. Not because of what I know, but because I survived what was supposed to destroy me. Because I'm proof that your punishment doesn't work. That exile doesn't break everyone. She took a step forward. How many others are out here, Gabriel? How many wolves did you send to die who learned to thrive instead? He turned slowly, and the look in his eyes made her wolf whimper with instinctive caution. 3 days, Kiera. Choose wisely. Then he was gone, his convoy disappearing into the swirling snow. Eddie released a long breath. Well, that went about as badly as it could have. He's coming back, Rose said grimly. With an army. Yes. Eddie looked at Kiera. Which means we have 3 days to figure out who's really sending those letters. And 3 days to decide if we're going to fight for you. Kiera's hands trembled, but not from fear. From rage. From determination. From the crystallizing realization that she wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for every wolf the council had ever tried to erase. Then we'd better get started, she said. The War Council convened in Eddie's private quarters, a stone room lit by oil lamps and heated by a fireplace that crackled with urgency. Kiera sat at a rough wooden table surrounded by Greystone's leaders, Eddie, Rose, a scarred hunter named Tobias, and a silver-haired woman introduced as Tracy, the settlement's healer and historian. Show us everything, Eddie said without preamble. Every document you found. Every piece of evidence. If we're going to risk war with the Alpha King, we need to understand exactly what we're protecting. Kiera's stomach twisted. I don't have the documents. They confiscated everything during my arrest. I only have what I remember. Then remember, Tracy said softly, sliding parchment and ink across the table. Write down everything. Names, dates, locations. We'll cross-reference with our own records. For the next 2 hours, Kiera wrote. She documented the erased bloodlines, entire families that had disappeared from official records after questioning council policies. She listed the pacts that had been systematically dismantled, their members scattered or exiled. She drew maps from memory, showing settlements that weren't supposed to exist. And then she wrote about the thing that had gotten her exiled, evidence that the council had been fabricating threats to justify their authority for over a century. When she finally set down the pen, her hand was cramping and her head pounded. Tracy studied the pages in silence, her expression growing darker with each line she read. Finally, she looked up. This confirms what we've suspected for years. But Kiera, there's something you need to see. She pulled a leather-bound journal from a locked chest and placed it on the table. The leather was old, cracked, but the pages inside were carefully preserved. This belonged to my grandmother, Tracy said. She was a council scribe before she was exiled 40 years ago. She kept records. Secret records. Of every exile, every erasure, every manipulation. She opened the journal to a marked page. Including this. Kiera leaned forward and felt the world tilt. It was a list of names. Dozens of them. And at the top, in careful script, Operation Severance, bloodlines deemed threatening to council stability. Her eyes scanned down the page, and her breath caught. Hartley bloodline, marked for elimination. Reason, natural resistance to Alpha Command. Hereditary tendency toward independent thought and questioning of authority. No, she whispered. That's not, Elder Alfred never mentioned. He probably didn't know, Tracy said gently. The council has been very careful. They don't eliminate entire bloodlines at once. Too obvious. They do it slowly. 1 generation at a time. Discredit the leaders. Exile the troublemakers. Arrange accidents for the ones who get too close to the truth. Rose leaned over Kiera's shoulder, her voice tight. How many bloodlines? 37 that we know of, Eddie said. Spread across 12 packs. All gone now. Officially, they died out naturally. Unofficially. He gestured to the journal. Kira's hands shook as she turned the pages. More names. More bloodlines. More wolves who'd been systematically erased because they posed a threat to the council's power. And then she found it. A name that made her heart stop. Thornfield bloodline, original alpha line. Status, compromised. Current alpha king Gabriel Thornfield is 4th generation council placement. True Thornfield heir, unknown, presumed eliminated. What is this? Kira's voice came out strangled. Gabriel isn't the true alpha king? Tracy's expression was grave. According to my grandmother's records, the council orchestrated a coup 70 years ago. They killed the original Thornfield alpha and his entire family. Then they installed a more controllable bloodline in their place. One that owed its power to the council, not to birthright. Does Gabriel know? Kira demanded. Unknown. But if he doesn't, he's the only one. Eddie tapped the journal. This is why the borders exist, Kira. This is why the council needs us isolated and discredited. Because we're not just exiles. We're the wolves who survived their purges. We're the evidence that their version of history is a lie. The room spun. Everything Kira thought she understood about pack politics, about the council, about Gabriel himself, all of it was built on fabrication. The letters, she said suddenly. Someone's been sending letters to other packs, using my name. What if, her mind raced. What if it's not about me at all? What if someone's trying to expose the council, and they're using my exile as cover? Tobias, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. Or what if someone's trying to start a war? Use the borders as a catalyst to destabilize the council's control? Either way, Rose said, we're caught in the middle. And the Alpha King is coming back in 3 days expecting us to hand Kira over. We won't, Eddie said firmly. We've never surrendered an exile to council justice. We won't start now. Even if it means war? Kira asked. Especially if it means war. Eddie's eyes were hard. The council has been picking us off one settlement at a time for decades. Isolating us. Keeping us weak. But if we stand together, if all 7 settlements unite, we have numbers they can't ignore. Tracy closed the journal carefully. There's something else you should know, Kira. Your arrival here wasn't random chance. 3 other exiles arrived at different border settlements in the past month. All of them were scholars. All of them had discovered information about the council's lies. They're purging anyone who gets too close to the truth, Rose said. But they're also creating an army of witnesses, Kira countered, her mind spinning with possibilities. Every scholar they exile is another person who can spread the truth. Another piece of evidence they can't control. A knock at the door interrupted them. The young scout from earlier entered, his face pale. Eddie. The Southern Watch just sent word. The Alpha King's convoy, it turned around. What? Eddie stood. Why? They don't know. But there's more. The scout swallowed hard. 2 of the wagons split off and headed toward Ironhold and Frostmere settlements. It looks like. He's going to every settlement, Kira finished, ice flooding her veins. He's not waiting 3 days. He's building a case against all of us. Right now. Eddie swore. Send runners to every settlement. Emergency council. We meet at dawn tomorrow at the crossroads. He turned to Kira. You wanted to know why Gabriel's afraid of you? It's not because of what you know. It's because of what you represent. What's that? Proof that the council's control is slipping. That exile doesn't silence truth anymore, it spreads it. His smile was fierce. Welcome to the rebellion, Kiera Hartley. Whether you meant to start one or not. Outside, wolves began to howl, a signal spreading from settlement to settlement across the frozen borderlands. The borders were waking up. And the Alpha King had just made his first mistake. He'd given them a reason to unite. The crossroads was neutral ground, a clearing marked by 7 stone pillars, each representing one of the border settlements. Kiera had never seen so many wolves in one place outside of Packlands. Over 200 of them, gathered in the pre-dawn cold, their breath forming clouds that merged into a single fog of anticipation and fear. She stood beside Eddie as the settlement leaders assembled. Each one carried the weight of their people's survival on their shoulders. Each one knew that the decision made today could mean the end of everything they'd built. The Alpha King visited 4 settlements yesterday, Eddie began without preamble. Ironhold, Frostmere, Winterden, and Stonehaven. In each one, he delivered the same message: surrender Kiera Hartley and any evidence of council corruption, or face annihilation. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. What did they say? Called out a woman from Ironhold, their leader, Cindy, if Kiera remembered correctly. They told him to leave, Eddie said. All 4 of them. A cheer went up, but Eddie raised his hand for silence. But he's not done. He's returned to Moon Valley to gather forces. Our scouts report he's calling in packs from across the region. Within 5 days, he'll march on the borders with an army of over 1,000 wolves. The cheering died instantly. 1,000? Tobias's voice was grim. We have 200 fighters at best. Maybe 300 if we arm everyone capable of holding a weapon. We can't win a direct fight, Cindy agreed. We need to negotiate. Find common ground before this escalates. There is no common ground, Kiera said quietly, and every eye turned to her. The council doesn't want compliance. They want erasure. They want us silent, scattered, or dead. Because we're proof that their lies have consequences. She's right, Tracy added, stepping forward with her grandmother's journal clutched to her chest. I've spent the night reading through these records. The council has systematically eliminated 37 bloodlines over the past century. They've orchestrated coups, arranged accidents, fabricated crimes, all to maintain their version of history. She paused. And every single one of us here is descended from one of those bloodlines. Shock rippled through the assembly. That's impossible, someone shouted. I'm from the Greymane line. We've been loyal to the council for generations. Your great-grandfather questioned a council tax policy, Tracy said, consulting the journal. He died in a hunting accident 3 days later. Your family learned to keep quiet. But the bloodline was still marked. Still monitored. And when your father spoke out about territory disputes 20 years ago, they exiled him, the man finished, his voice hollow. Told us he'd committed treason. We're all threats, Eddie said. Not because of what we've done, but because of what we could become. The council's greatest fear is that we'll remember who we really are. That we'll unite. That we'll. An explosion cut him off. The eastern pillar erupted in flames and stone fragments, the blast throwing wolves to the ground. Kiera's ears rang as she scrambled to her feet, her wolf surging forward with battle-ready instincts. Through the smoke and chaos, figures emerged. Not wolves. Hunters. Human hunters wearing council insignias, armed with silver weapons and wolfsbane grenades. Ambush! Rose screamed, her blade already in hand. They sold us out. But it was worse than that. As Kiera's vision cleared, she saw wolves among the hunters, pack wolves from Moon Valley, wearing the Alpha King's colors. They'd been waiting. Watching. Planning this. Fall back to the treeline. Eddie roared, but another explosion blocked their retreat. They were surrounded. Gabriel stepped through the smoke like a dark angel of judgment, his eyes finding Kira instantly. "You forced my hand," he said, his voice carrying across the clearing. "I gave you a choice. You chose war. You were always going to attack," Kira shot back, even as silver bullets whistled past her head. "You just needed an excuse to justify it. Surrender now, and I'll spare the settlements. Resist, and I'll burn them all to ash." Around them, border wolves were falling. Not many, they were skilled fighters, survivors, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Kira saw a young wolf from Frostmere take a silver blade to the shoulder and go down screaming. Eddie moved to defend him and took a bullet to the leg. "No." Kira lunged forward, her wolf breaking free in a burst of transformation. Fur erupted across her skin, bones reshaping with practiced efficiency. She hit the ground on 4 paws and charged the hunter who'd shot Eddie, her jaws finding his throat before he could reload. But there were too many. For every hunter she took down, 2 more appeared. And then she saw it. Gabriel wasn't fighting. He stood at the edge of the battle, watching her with an expression that made her blood run cold. Not anger. Not hatred. Calculation. He was studying her. Learning her patterns. Waiting for the moment when she was too exhausted to fight back. Rose appeared at her side in wolf form, blood matting her gray fur. "We can't win this," her eyes seemed to say. "We need to run." But if they ran, the settlements would be defenseless. If they stayed, they'd all die. Kira's heart shattered as she realized the impossible choice before her: save herself and let everyone else burn, or sacrifice herself and hope it was enough to stop the slaughter. She shifted back to human form, her body screaming in protest. "Stop." Her voice cut through the chaos. "Gabriel, stop. I'll surrender. Just stop killing them." The fighting slowed. Stopped. Gabriel approached her slowly, and this close, she could see something in his eyes that she hadn't expected. Regret. "It didn't have to be this way," he said softly. "Yes, it did," Kira replied. "Because you're terrified of what happens when wolves stop obeying." He reached for her, silver shackles in hand. But before he could close them around her wrists, a howl split the air, different from any she'd heard before. Ancient. Powerful. Resonating with an authority that made even Gabriel freeze. From the northern treeline, wolves emerged. Not border wolves. Not pack wolves. Wild wolves. The kind that hadn't been seen in generations. The kind that existed before councils and hierarchies and politics. And leading them was a figure Kira recognized from Tracy's journal descriptions. A woman with silver white hair and eyes like moonlight. The true Thornfield heir. And she was smiling. The woman moved like moonlight given form, fluid, ethereal, but with an undercurrent of lethal power that made every wolf in the clearing go still. Even Gabriel's hunters lowered their weapons, instinct overriding training as they recognized something primal in her presence. She stopped 10 feet from Gabriel, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of centuries. "Hello, cousin." Gabriel's face went white. "That's impossible. The Thornfield line was murdered?" The woman tilted her head. "Yes, the council did try very hard to kill us all 70 years ago. They almost succeeded." Her smile was sharp as broken glass. Almost. Kira's mind raced. The journal had said the true heir was presumed dead. Presumed. Not confirmed. "Who are you?" Gabriel demanded, but his voice shook, barely perceptible, but there. "My name is Lyanna Thornfield. Daughter of Alex Thornfield, the true Alpha King. The one your grandfather helped the council murder." She gestured to the wild wolves flanking her, at least 50 of them, all watching with predatory focus. "These are the descendants of wolves who refused to bow to the council's puppet regime. We've been waiting in the deep north for 70 years. Waiting for the right moment to reclaim what was stolen. This is your moment? Gabriel's hand dropped to the sword at his hip. A border skirmish? No. Lyanna's gaze shifted to Kira, and there was something knowing in her expression. This is the moment when everything your false counsel built begins to crumble. Because she pointed directly at Kira. Is the catalyst we've been waiting for. Me? Kira's voice came out strangled. I'm nobody. I'm just. And Hartley, Lyanna interrupted. One of the oldest bloodlines. The ones who could never be commanded. The ones whose wolves chose loyalty freely rather than through alpha compulsion. She stepped closer to Kira, studying her with ancient eyes. Do you know why the council feared your family above all others? Kira shook her head mutely. Because Hartleys can break alpha commands. Not resist them, break them. Shatter the bonds that alphas use to control their packs. Lyanna's smile widened. Imagine what happens when that ability spreads. When other wolves learn they can choose their loyalty instead of having it forced upon them. The clearing erupted in whispers. Kira saw fear flash across the faces of Gabriel's wolves, pack wolves who'd lived their entire lives under alpha command, who'd never questioned whether their loyalty was truly their own. You're lying, Gabriel said, but he'd taken a step back. If such an ability existed, the council would have documented it. They did, Tracy said, stepping forward with her grandmother's journal. Then they destroyed every record they could find. Except this one. She opened the journal to a specific page. Operation Severance wasn't just about eliminating dangerous bloodlines. It was about erasing knowledge of what wolves used to be. Before councils. Before forced hierarchy. When every wolf chose their own path. Lyanna nodded approvingly. The council built their power on a lie, that wolves need alphas to command them, that hierarchy is natural and unchallengeable. But bloodlines like the Hartleys proved otherwise. So they had to be eliminated. Kira's mind spun. Everything she'd believed about pack structure, about alpha authority, about her own nature, all of it was crumbling. If I can break alpha commands, she said slowly, then why haven't I? Because you never tried, Lyanna replied. You were raised to believe alpha commands were absolute. So you never questioned them. Never tested them. Her eyes gleamed. But you're questioning now, aren't you? And she was. Kira thought about every time she'd felt an alpha command slide across her mind like oil on water, uncomfortable, but never quite taking hold the way other wolves described. She'd always assumed she was just naturally stubborn. What if it was more than that? Gabriel's voice cut through her thoughts. Enough of this. Lyanna, if you're truly a Thornfield, then you know the penalty for challenging the Alpha King's authority. I'm not challenging your authority, cousin. Lyanna's smile was all teeth. I'm exposing the fact that you never had any to begin with. Your entire bloodline is a council fabrication. You're not a king. You're a puppet. Rage flashed across Gabriel's face, and his power lashed out, a wave of alpha command so strong it brought half the wolves in the clearing to their knees. Submit, he growled, the word reverberating with supernatural force. Kira felt it slam into her like a physical blow. Felt it trying to wrap around her mind, to force her down, to make her bow. And for the first time in her life, she pushed back. Not with strength. Not with will. She simply refused. The command shattered like glass. Kira remained standing while pack wolves whimpered around her, fighting the compulsion that had brought them low. Gabriel stared at her in shock. How? Because she's free, Lyanna said softly. And freedom, once recognized, cannot be unchained. Something shifted in the clearing. Kira felt it, a ripple of awareness spreading through the wolves still standing. The border wolves who'd never submitted to alpha commands. who'd built their lives on choice rather than compulsion. And slowly, impossibly, some of Gabriel's own wolves began to rise. Not in defiance. Not in rebellion. In question. What if we could choose? Kira saw it in their eyes. Saw the moment when decades of unquestioned loyalty began to crack. Eddie pulled himself to his feet, leaning heavily on Rose. His leg was still bleeding, but his voice was steady. This is what you were really afraid of, isn't it, Thornfield? Not Kira. Not the borders. Not even the truth about your bloodline. He smiled grimly. You were afraid of what happens when wolves remember they have a choice. Gabriel's hand trembled on his sword hilt. His hunters looked uncertain. His wolves looked confused. And Kira realized something that changed everything. She didn't need to defeat Gabriel. She just needed to show his wolves they could walk away. I'm not your enemy, she said quietly, meeting Gabriel's eyes. The council is. They've been using you the same way they tried to use me. The same way they've used every wolf who ever questioned whether things had to be this way. She's right, Lyanna added. The council made you Alpha King because they knew you'd enforce their lies. But what happens when you learn the truth? When you realize everything you built your identity on is fabrication? For a long moment, Gabriel just stood there. Then he did something Kira never expected. He lowered his sword. Tell me, he said, his voice raw. Tell me everything. The council arrived at dawn. They came with an army, 1,200 wolves from 8 different packs, all bearing the council's silver and black banners. At their head rode the 5 council elders, ancient wolves who'd held power for longer than most could remember. But they weren't expecting what they found. Instead of scattered border settlements, they faced a unified force. 200 border wolves stood shoulder to shoulder with Gabriel's former soldiers, the ones who'd chosen to stay after learning the truth. Wild wolves from the north flanked them, their presence a statement that the old ways weren't as dead as the council had claimed. And at the center of it all stood 3 figures, Lyanna Thornfield, rightful heir to the throne. Gabriel Thornfield, the council's former puppet. And Kira Hartley, the exile who'd sparked a revolution. Elder Mordecai, the council's leader, pulled his horse to a stop 50 yards from their line. His face was a mask of fury barely contained. Gabriel Thornfield, his voice boomed across the frozen field. You were ordered to eliminate the border threat. Instead, you've joined them. Explain yourself. Gabriel stepped forward. The past night had changed him. Kira could see it in the set of his shoulders, the steadiness of his gaze. He'd spent hours reading Tracy's journal, learning the truth about his bloodline, about the council's manipulations. I was told the borders were lawless, Gabriel called back. That exiles were criminals who deserved their fate. I believed you because I was raised to believe you. Because questioning the council was unthinkable. He paused. But I've seen the truth now. And I won't be your weapon anymore. You forget yourself, boy, Mordecai snarled. You are Alpha King because we made you Alpha King. We can unmake you just as easily. Then do it, Gabriel challenged. Take back the title you gave my grandfather after you murdered the true Thornfield line. See how many wolves follow a council that admits to 70 years of lies. Lyanna stepped forward beside him. Hello, Mordecai. It's been a long time. The elder's face went ashen. You're dead. We made certain. You made certain of nothing, Lyanna interrupted. You killed my father, my brothers, my mother. You burned our home and told the Pax it was a tragic accident. But I survived. And I've been gathering evidence of your crimes for 7 decades. She held up a leather satchel. Records. Testimonies. Proof of every bloodline you've erased, every pack you've manipulated, every lie you've built your power on. Those records are forbidden, another elder, a woman named Agnes, hissed. Destroy them immediately. No. Kiera's voice cut through the tension. She moved to stand beside Lyanna and Gabriel, her heart pounding but her resolve steady. These records belonged to every wolf who was told their family died of natural causes. Every wolf who was exiled for asking questions. Every wolf who lived in fear of speaking truth. She looked directly at Mordecai. You sent me to the borders to silence me. Instead, you gave me exactly what I needed, proof that I wasn't alone. That your lies affected hundreds, thousands of wolves. This is treason, Mordecai declared. All of you will be executed for. Under whose authority? Eddie stepped forward, flanked by the other settlement leaders. You have no jurisdiction over the borders. You never did. We exist outside pack law by your own decree. And even in pack lands, Gabriel added, your authority is built on manufactured consent. How many of these wolves, he gestured to the council's army, would follow you if they knew the truth? If they understood that alpha commands aren't absolute? That their loyalty was compelled, not chosen? Murmurs rippled through the council's forces. Kiera could see doubt spreading like wildfire. Enough. Mordecai's power lashed out, an alpha command so massive it was meant to bring every wolf in the field to their knees. I command you all, submit. The command hit like a tidal wave. Kiera felt it crash against her mind and shatter harmlessly. Beside her, Lyanna smiled as the command slid off her like water off stone. Gabriel gritted his teeth but remained standing, his thorn-filled blood, diluted as it was, gave him some resistance. But the border wolves, they stood tall. Every single one of them. Because they'd spent years, decades, learning to live without alpha compulsion. They'd chosen their loyalty freely, and no command could take that choice away. The contrast was devastating. The council's own soldiers struggled against Mordecai's command, some managing to stay upright, others forced to their knees despite fighting it. You see? Kiera called out to the council's army. You see how easily they control you? How your own will means nothing against their commands? She stepped forward, her voice ringing clear. But it doesn't have to be this way. You can choose. You can question. You can refuse. She's lying. Agnes shrieked. Alpha commands are natural law. They're not, Lyanna said calmly. They're a tool. One that some bloodlines developed and others learned to resist. The council found wolves who could command and elevated them. Then they systematically eliminated any bloodline that proved commands could be broken. They created a hierarchy built on compulsion and called it natural order. A wolf in the council's army, a young male with captain's insignia, stepped forward. Is this true? Elder Mordecai, is this true? Get back in line, Captain, Mordecai ordered, his command lacing the words. The captain faltered, struggling, but then he looked at Kiera. At the border wolves standing free. At the choice they represented. And he broke the command. No, he said simply. I choose no. It was like watching a dam break. One by one, wolves in the council's army began to shake off the compulsion. Not all of them, some bloodlines were too susceptible, too ingrained with obedience. But enough. Dozens. Then hundreds. This is mutiny. Mordecai roared. I'll have you all executed for. You'll have no one, Gabriel said coldly. Because your power just died. Right here. Right now. He turned to address the assembled wolves. I'm disbanding the council effective immediately. Every pack will govern itself. Every wolf will choose their own loyalty. The borders are officially recognized as sovereign territory. He looked at Lyanna. And the Thornfield throne returns to its rightful heir. Lyanna inclined her head. I accept. But not as your ruler, as your servant. True alphas don't command loyalty. They earn it. Mordecai's face twisted with rage. He reached for a weapon. And Kira's wolf surged forward. She shifted mid-leap, her transformation fluid and fierce. She didn't kill him. She didn't need to. She simply knocked him to the ground and stood over him, her jaws inches from his throat. This is what freedom looks like, she thought. Not permission. Not obedience. Choice. She shifted back, leaving Mordecai gasping in the snow. It's over, she said quietly. Your counsel is finished. Your lies are exposed. And every wolf here gets to choose what comes next. The field erupted in howls, not of aggression, but of liberation. The boarders had won. Not through violence, but through truth. Months later, the boarders looked different. Kira stood at the edge of Greystone, watching as workers raised the frame of a new meeting hall, the largest structure the settlement had ever built. Around her, wolves moved with purpose and pride, their laughter carrying on the wind that no longer felt quite so cold. You're thinking too hard again, Rose said, appearing at her side with 2 steaming mugs. I can literally see the gears turning in your head. Kira accepted the tea gratefully. I'm thinking about how much has changed. How quickly everything shifted once wolves understood they had a choice. Not just understood, Eddie corrected, joining them. His leg had healed well, leaving only a slight limp. Once they felt it. That's what you gave them, Kira. Not information. Freedom. It was true. In the months since the council's dissolution, the transformation had been staggering. For more border settlements had been established. Trade routes that had been secret for decades were now open and thriving. Wolves from packlands were arriving daily, not as exiles, but as immigrants, choosing border life over the old hierarchies. And the packs themselves were changing. Without the council's iron grip, they were reorganizing. Some kept their alpha structures but made them voluntary. Others adopted the border model entirely, leadership through merit and choice rather than bloodline and compulsion. The summit starts in an hour, Tracy reminded them, consulting a leather-bound schedule. Representatives from 18 packs, all 7 original border settlements, and the northern wild wolves. Biggest gathering in recorded history. Kira's stomach fluttered with nerves. The summit had been Liona's idea, a neutral meeting to establish new laws, new agreements, a new way forward for all wolves. And somehow, despite her protests, Kira had been named the border territory's primary representative. I'm not ready for this, she muttered. You're more ready than anyone, said a familiar voice. Kira turned to find Gabriel approaching, dressed not in the formal regalia of an alpha king, but in simple traveling clothes. He'd abdicated the throne to Liona 3 weeks ago, claiming he wanted to understand what he'd been ruling before he could lead effectively again. Since then, he'd been living in the borders. Learning. Listening. And, occasionally, seeking out Kira's company. The delegates are assembled, he said. Liona sent me to find you. Kira took a deep breath. Right. Summit. I can do this. You can, Gabriel agreed. His eyes held something warm, something that made her heart skip. You've already done the impossible, Kira. Everything else is just details. The meeting hall was packed. Kira recognized faces from every corner of the wolf world, pack alphas who'd once served the council, border leaders who'd survived decades of exile, wild wolves who hadn't participated in pack politics in living memory. Liona stood at the center, silver-white hair gleaming in the lamplight. When Kira entered, she smiled and gestured to an empty seat beside her. Thank you all for coming, Liona began once everyone was settled. We gathered today not as enemies or rivals, but as wolves seeking a better path forward. The council's fall has created uncertainty. Fear. But also opportunity. She paused. We have a chance to build something new. Something better. But only if we choose it together. The discussions lasted hours. Debates over territory, trade, justice, leadership. Kira contributed when asked, surprised by how seriously the delegates took her opinions. The exile who was supposed to die forgotten had become a voice that Pax actually listened to. The Hartley proposal, one alpha said, consulting his notes. About bloodline registration and protection, I think we should adopt it across all territories. No more secret erasures. No more families disappearing without record. Kira felt tears prick her eyes. Elder Alfred would have loved this. Would have been proud. Agreed, another alpha said. And the border model for voluntary alpha bonds, my pack wants to trial it. See if our wolves stay by choice or command. Mine too, a third voice added. Then a fourth. A fifth. Change was happening. Real, lasting change. As the summit concluded, delegates mingling and making their own agreements, Gabriel found Kira outside the hall. Walk with me? He asked. They walked in comfortable silence to the eastern overlook, where the borders stretched out in endless white beneath a sky full of stars. I owe you an apology, Gabriel said finally. For everything. For believing the council's lies. For exiling you. For. You were raised in their system, Kira interrupted gently. Taught that their way was the only way. I don't blame you for that. You should, he said. I almost destroyed you. You didn't, though. She turned to face him. And these past months, watching you learn, watching you change, that takes courage, Gabriel. Not everyone can admit they were wrong. I had a good teacher. His smile was soft. You never gave up on the truth, even when it cost you everything. That's remarkable. Something shifted in the air between them. Kira felt it, the pull she'd been trying to ignore for weeks. The way her heart raced when he was near. The way his eyes lingered on her when he thought she wasn't looking. Kira, he said quietly. I know I have no right to ask. Not after everything. But when I look at you, I see, he paused, searching for words. I see everything I want to become. Everything I should have been. Gabriel. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking for a chance. To prove that I'm more than the puppet the council made me. To build something real with you. If you'll have me. Kira's breath caught. She thought about the woman who'd been exiled 3 months ago, broken, angry, alone. That woman would have never imagined this moment. But she wasn't that woman anymore. She'd survived. She'd adapted. She'd become something the council never intended to create. She'd become free. Yes, she said simply. Yes, I'll have you. But not as an alpha king. Just as Gabriel. Just as yourself. His smile was like sunrise. That's all I want to be. When he kissed her, it felt like coming home. Like choosing something beautiful instead of having it forced upon her. Like freedom tasted, sweet and wild and entirely her own. They broke apart to find half the summit delegates watching from the hall windows, several of them cheering. Kira laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. So what now? Gabriel asked, his hand finding hers. She looked out at the borders, her home now, by choice. Looked at the settlements thriving in the distance. Looked at the future they were all building together. Now? She smiled. Now we keep choosing. Every day. To be better. To be free. To be exactly who we want to be. And in the borderlands where she'd been sent to disappear, surrounded by wolves who'd learned to thrive without chains, Kira Hartley finally understood what Elder Alfred had tried to teach her. Knowledge was power. But freedom? Freedom was everything. Thank you so much for watching this journey, my beautiful pack. Kiera's story shows us that sometimes the punishment meant to break us becomes the catalyst for our greatest transformation. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe for more emotional werewolf romances. Drop a comment telling me what you thought. Did you see Gabriel's redemption coming? What would you do if you discovered you could break alpha commands? I love reading your thoughts. Until next time, choose your own path and never let anyone tell you that you can't be free. See you in the next story.